Jack had been stationed on a small, quiet outpost on the distant planet of Zornine for over 6 months. It was one of those places that felt like it was tucked away from the rest of the galaxy. The planet was covered in lush green forests, winding rivers, and mountains that touched the sky. It was peaceful, but Jack couldn't help but feel the weight of isolation. The only humans here were stationed to keep the peace, tend to the equipment, and offer medical assistance to the few alien species that lived nearby. The day had started like any other. Jack was in the med bay, preparing medical supplies when a call came through. His heart raced as he listened to the voice over the comms. Medical emergency. One of the Zorani settlers has been injured. They need immediate help. Zorani were a humanoid species, tall and graceful, with smooth gray skin and large, expressive eyes. Jack had worked with them before, but this would be the first time he'd be called to treat one of their injuries. He quickly gathered his tools and set off for the settlement. It took about 20 minutes to reach the Zorni settlement. A cluster of elegant buildings made of native wood, blending perfectly with the surrounding forest. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth. As Jack stepped off the transport, he saw several Zorani warriors standing guard, their tall figures towering over the surroundings. They were serious, focused, and a bit wary of the human medic. A woman, one of the Zorani, walked up to him. She was clearly in pain, leaning heavily on a young man who was helping her. Her face was drawn, and her gray skin had a pale tint. Training kicked in immediately. "What's the situation?" he asked, his voice calm, but firm. "It's her leg," the young man said, his voice trembling. "She fell during a hunt. Her leg's been broken." Jack knelt down and examined the injury. It wasn't a clean break, but the bones were misaligned, and there was severe swelling around the area. You could tell it was causing her immense pain. Jack looked up at the young man. "I'll need to set the leg. It'll hurt, but she'll be okay." The woman looked at Jack, her eyes full of uncertainty, but there was no fear there, just a deep sadness. Jack made a motion to the young man to help her sit. As the Zorani woman lowered herself to the ground, she winced, clutching her leg in pain. "Can you hold still?" Jack asked gently. "It will be over quickly." She nodded, but still didn't seem fully ready. He knew this wasn't just about the physical pain. This was about trust. The Zorani had never interacted much with humans, and Jack wasn't sure how they felt about him being in such close proximity. Jack placed his hands gently on the leg, his fingers feeling for the right position. The woman's eyes remained focused on him, her gaze intense. It was like she was trying to communicate something beyond words, and Jack wasn't sure what it was. It made him feel strangely self-conscious, but he didn't have time to dwell on it. With a swift motion, he adjusted the bones, setting them back into place. The woman gasped in pain, her whole body stiffening. Jack could feel her trembling beneath his hands. The young man who had been helping her quickly moved closer, but Jack raised a hand to stop him. "I've got it," Jack said quietly. The Zorani woman's hand moved then, reaching for Jack's. Without a word, she grasped his hand, her grip surprisingly firm. Jack didn't pull away. Something about the gesture told him that she wasn't doing it out of fear, but something deeper. She was reaching out for comfort, for reassurance. He carefully finished setting the leg, and the pain began to subside.
Oh.
The woman's breathing steadied, but she didn't let go of his hand. Jack was taken aback by the warmth of her touch, the way her fingers wrapped around his like they were made to fit. It wasn't just the pain, he realized. She was holding on to him for something else. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice softer than he expected. Jack nodded, unsure how to respond. He wasn't used to being in such close physical contact with anyone, let alone an alien species. But there was something oddly comforting about her hold. It made him feel like he was doing more than just a job. He was helping her in a way that went beyond the medical procedure. The young man who had been standing silently spoke up again. "She doesn't like to be touched by strangers. This is ... very unusual for her." Jack looked up at him, startled. "Why? She doesn't trust easily." "Not with humans, not with anyone," the young man explained. "She's not the only one. We're a private people, and we've been wary of outsiders for a long time. Jack processed this, looking back at the woman. Her hand still held his. There was an unspoken bond forming between them, and Jack couldn't help but wonder what it meant. Was it a simple act of comfort, or was it something more? She looked up at him with those large eyes of hers, full of something Jack couldn't quite place. It wasn't fear, not anymore. It was something deeper, something that made him feel connected to her in a way he couldn't explain. And as the moments passed, he realized that neither of them was ready to let go. Her hand remained tightly in his, the warmth of her touch grounding him in a way he wasn't prepared for. Had come here to help set her leg, but something more had begun. Whether it was out of loneliness, curiosity, or something else entirely, Jack couldn't tell. But one thing was for certain: the moment their hands connected, nothing would ever be the same. The days that followed the incident with Lyra's injury were strange. Jack couldn't quite shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. He had treated hundreds of injuries in his career, but none had left him feeling this unsettled. It wasn't just the injury or the strange connection that seemed to form when she grabbed his hand. It was everything about Lyra, the way she looked at him, as if searching for something, and the way she clung to him even as he worked. Lyra had been quiet since the injury. Her leg was healing, and she spent most of her days resting in her home. Just outside the settlement, Jack checked in on her regularly, always finding her waiting for him, always reaching out to him with that same quiet, intense gaze. She didn't speak much, but Jack could see the questions in her eyes. "How's the leg?" Jack asked one morning as he arrived at her home carrying a small medical kit. Lyra shifted on the cushions where she was resting. Her room was simple, with wooden walls and soft bedding, but there was something elegant about the way it was arranged. She motioned for Jack to sit. When he did, she gave him a small, almost shy smile. "It's better, thank you," she said, her voice soft but clear. Jack nodded, unpacking his medical kit. As he worked, he couldn't help but notice how she was watching him, not in a way that was aggressive or demanding, but with something almost like curiosity. He had treated injured soldiers before, and their gratitude came in the form of words or gestures, but Lyra was different. Her gaze held something deeper, something Jack wasn't sure he could define. She hadn't let go of his hand since the moment they'd first touched. Even now, as he adjusted the bandages on her leg, she held his hand gently but firmly. The strange connection from the first day had only grown stronger. "You've been very patient with me," Jack said, looking up from his work. "Most people don't like being touched so much." Lyra's expression softened. I don't know how to explain it," she said quietly. "I've never felt this before. Trust, I think. It feels ... comforting." Jack paused, his heart racing slightly. He wasn't used to people, especially not aliens, being so open with him, but it felt different with Lyra. She didn't seem to fear him, even though he was a stranger to her, someone from a species she didn't understand. "I didn't know humans could be so ... gentle," she added after a moment, her words causing Jack to look up at her again. "We were told you were distant, unemotional." Jack frowned. He had heard rumors about how his people were viewed by other species: cold, disconnected, lacking empathy. It was something he'd always tried to ignore, but hearing it from Lyra made him wonder. What if there was truth to it? What if his own people had given off the wrong impression? "We're not all like that," Jack said quietly, squeezing her hand. "We care, even if we don't always show it the way others do." Lyra's eyes softened, and she squeezed his hand in return. "I believe you." The moment lingered in the air between them, a delicate, fragile connection that neither of them seemed willing to break. For Jack, it felt like the world outside had faded away, leaving only the two of them in the room. He had never expected this when he first arrived at Zoranine. He had thought his job would be routine: help the injured, patch up wounds, and move on. But Lyra had changed everything. "How do you feel?" Jack asked, after a long silence breaking the tension that had built up. "You're healing well? Any pain?" Lyra shook her head. "No, it's mostly just ... the waiting. I've never been in one place for so long." Jack smiled. "I know the feeling. It's not easy being stuck in one place." She nodded. "I'm not used to it. My people don't stay in one place for long. We're nomads. Jack raised an eyebrow. Nomads. That's a bit different than what I'm used to. Don't you ever feel like you need to settle down somewhere? Lyra looked down, her eyes thoughtful. Not really. My people have always roamed. We find new places to live, to explore, to learn. But now, now I'm not sure. Being here with you, it feels different, like maybe it's okay to stay. Jack felt his heart skip a beat. The words hung in the air like an unspoken promise, a suggestion of something more. Lyra had never shown any interest in staying in one place, yet here she was, admitting that she was beginning to feel at home with him. He wasn't sure what it meant, but he couldn't deny that the thought of her staying here with him made his chest tighten in a way he hadn't expected. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just sat there, sharing the quiet, the connection that seemed to grow stronger with every passing second. Jack couldn't explain it, but he knew he didn't want to let go of her hand. Not now, not ever. Lyra's voice broke the silence. Jack, I don't understand this. Feeling. Why do I want to hold on to you like this? Jack looked at her, searching her eyes for the answer. Maybe, maybe, because you're not alone anymore. She looked at him, her gaze full of emotions. She couldn't put into words. For the first time, Jack realized that she wasn't just talking about the injury. She was talking about something deeper, a need for connection, for trust, for something more. He squeezed her hand, offering her a small smile. Maybe that's all it takes. It's just not being alone. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. It was the kind of silence where two people could simply exist together, where words weren't necessary to communicate the depth of their bond. Jack wasn't sure what the future held, but as he sat there with Lyra, his hand in hers, he knew one thing for certain. His life on Zoranine had changed forever. The days after Jack's visit to Lyra's home passed slowly. Jack found himself visiting her more often than he had originally planned. His duties at the outpost were routine, but every time he checked in on her, there was something new to learn. Something about her and the way she interacted with him made him feel connected to a world that was far beyond the small human outpost. He wasn't sure if it was the physical closeness that had built between them or the quiet conversations. But something was growing. Something important. Lyra's leg was healing well, and she was able to move around with less difficulty each day. Still, she insisted on staying in her small home by the edge of the settlement, where she could watch the sun rise and set over the vast green forests. The area was peaceful, and Jack could see why she might have been drawn to it.
8.
Often see her sitting by the window, gazing out at the horizon. There was a quiet strength about her that Jack admired. Feeling better today? Jack asked one morning, as he stepped into her home with the usual medical kit in hand. Lyra smiled, but there was a sadness behind her eyes. Yes, she said. Softly, the leg is healing well, but I feel something different now, like I'm not sure where I belong anymore. Jack paused, surprised by the depth of her words. He had thought about her a lot since their first meeting, and he couldn't help but wonder what she meant. Her people were nomads, always moving, always searching. Now it seemed like she was questioning that lifestyle. I thought you liked being on the move, Jack said gently, sitting across from her. Isn't that part of who you are? Lyra nodded slowly, looking down at her hands. It was, she said quietly. But now I wonder if I've been running away from something. From ... something important. Jack watched her closely. There was a vulnerability in her voice that he hadn't heard before. She had always been strong, confident, even after the injury, but now she seemed uncertain, lost in a way. I don't think you have to run anymore, Jack said, his voice gentle. Maybe it's time to stay put for a while. You don't have to keep moving, not if you don't want to. Lyra looked up at him, her eyes wide. You think I could stay? That I could be here? Jack nodded, his hand resting on the table. Between them, of course, you're not alone. You've got people who care about you here, including me. The words slipped out before he could stop them. For a moment, he was surprised by his own honesty. It wasn't like him to say things like that. But when it came to Lyra, it felt natural. He had never felt this way about anyone before. She had a way of pulling him into her world, making him feel like he belonged. And in return, he wanted her to feel like she belonged too. Lyra seemed to be lost in thought, her fingers brushing over the surface of the table. Finally, she spoke again, her voice soft but firm. "I don't know what this means," she said, looking up at him. "I don't know what I'm feeling. But I do know that when you're around, I don't feel so alone." Jack's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't remember the last time someone had made him feel so needed. He had always been a soldier, always focused on the mission, on the task at hand. But with Lyra, everything seemed different. She wasn't just an alien to him anymore. She was someone he cared about, someone whose presence he looked forward to. "I feel the same way," Jack admitted, his voice low. Lyra smiled. But it was a quiet, thoughtful smile, as if she were still processing everything. She didn't let go of his hand, though. Every time they spoke, every time they shared a quiet moment together, her hand remained in his, as if it was a lifeline. And Jack had to admit, it felt like one to him too. The next few days brought a change to the settlement. Word had spread that Jack was spending more time with Lyra, and the rest of the Zorani had begun to notice. Jack had heard whispers among the settlers, some of them curious, others skeptical. The Zorani were a proud people, and their traditions ran deep. They weren't used to humans becoming so close to their own, let alone a human medic spending time with someone as important as Lyra. One afternoon, while Jack was checking in on her, a group of Zorani elders came to visit. They were tall and imposing, their faces serious, their movements deliberate. They stood outside Lyra's door, watching them with sharp, evaluating eyes. Jack felt a twinge of discomfort. He had met these elders before, but never in such a personal setting. He stood up, ready to explain himself, but Lyra rose first. She moved with quiet confidence, and when she opened the door, her gaze met the elders with the same strength she had shown Jack. "Welcome," Lyra said, her voice firm but calm. "What brings you here?" One of the elders, a woman with silver hair and eyes as sharp as knives, stepped forward. "We have heard much about your injury, Lyra," she said, "and we have seen the human medic visiting you. We wonder why." Lyra didn't flinch. "He is helping me. There's nothing to question." The elder raised an eyebrow. "Helping you? Or is it something else? I know the bond you share with him is unusual. Humans are not known for their compassion. Not like we are." Jack took a deep breath, stepping forward. "I've been helping Lyra, as I would anyone else in need of care," he said, his voice steady. "I don't know what you've heard, but it's nothing beyond what it seems." Lyra turned to him, and for the first time, there was a look of warmth in her eyes. "He is right," she said. "He is not like the others. He doesn't just fix wounds. He listens, and I need that right now." The elder didn't speak for a moment, then she nodded, a sharp, calculating look in her eyes. "Very well, Lyra. But understand this, your actions will not go unnoticed. Your choices affect not just you, but all of us. Be careful who you trust." With that, the group turned and left, leaving Jack and Lyra standing in the doorway, watching them go. Lyra turned to Jack, her expression softening. "I think they're just worried. I've always been the one to keep my distance from others. They've never seen me like this before." Jack nodded. "I understand. They'll see that you're not alone. Not with me here." Lyra smiled. Adam again? And for a moment, everything felt right. She wasn't just an injured alien anymore. She wasn't a person to be kept at arm's length. She was someone who mattered. Jack knew without a doubt that whatever happened next, he wouldn't let go of her hand. The weeks that followed were filled with quiet moments and small changes, but something was shifting. The Zorani elders had accepted Jack's presence for now, though they remained cautious. They still watched him closely, especially when it came to his relationship with Lyra. The other settlers were more open, and over time, Jack began to see how much they cared for her. Lyra was more than just a simple nomad to them. She was a symbol, a person they looked up to and respected. For Jack, he found himself coming to terms with his growing feelings for her. It wasn't just the bond they shared after the injury, though that had played a part. It was the way she made him feel like he wasn't just a medic doing his job. She made him feel like a person again, someone who mattered. It was something Jack hadn't realized he needed until now. One day, as Jack arrived at her home to check on her leg, he noticed that something was different. Lyra wasn't in her usual spot by the window. He frowned and walked further inside, calling her name. "Softly, Lyra." Jack called again, this time a little louder. "I'm here," came her voice, and Jack turned to see her standing by the door, looking out at the horizon. She turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, her voice low. "About everything." Jack set down his medical kit and approached her, standing beside her as they both looked out over the vast landscape. "What about?" "I've spent my whole life running," Jack, Lyra began. "Running from one place to the next. I never stayed anywhere for long. I always thought that was the way it had to be. But now, ... now I don't know. I'm not sure anymore." Jack's heart tightened. He knew exactly what she meant. He had been a soldier for most of his life, always moving, always fighting for a cause. But in the past few weeks, as he spent time with Lyra, he had begun to understand what it felt like to stop, to be still. He had never considered what it might be like to live without the constant weight of his duties. "You don't have to run anymore." "Lyra," Jack said softly, his voice full of sincerity, "you found a place here." "With me?" She glanced up at him, and for a moment their eyes locked. She didn't speak, but there was something in the way she looked at him that made his chest tighten. She wasn't just talking about a place, a home, or a settlement. She was talking about finding a place in her heart. Jack wasn't sure if he was ready to face what that might mean. Lyra broke the silence first, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know if I can just ... stay. I don't know if I can settle down." Jack turned to face her fully. "You don't have to decide everything today. We don't have to rush this. I'm not going anywhere." Her eyes softened at his words. She reached for his hand again, her fingers gently curling around his. "You mean it? You're not going anywhere?" Jack smiled, feeling warmth spread through him. "No, I'm not. I'll be here, whenever you're ready." Lyra nodded. Slowly, her gaze flicking down to their hands. "It feels ... good, Jack, being here with you. But it also feels like I'm holding on to something I'm afraid to let go of." Jack squeezed her hand gently. "Don't have to let go, not unless you want to. I'm not going to make you change. I just want to be here with you for as long as you'll let me." For a moment, there was a silence between them, but it was different this time. It wasn't the silence of uncertainty, but one of understanding. They both knew that things were changing, but neither of them had to force it. Later that evening, as the sun began to set over the horizon, Jack and Lyra found themselves sitting together on the steps outside her home. They watched the sky turn shades of orange and purple, the sounds of the forest surrounding them. For the first time in a long while, Jack felt at peace. He had been so used to the chaos of his life before, to the endless battles and missions. But now, in this quiet moment with Lyra, everything felt ... right. Lyra turned to him, her eyes thoughtful. "Again, Jack, I think I'm ready to stay. Not forever, maybe, but for now." Jack smiled warmly. "That's all I'm asking for. We don't have to know the future. You can just take it one day at a time." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and Jack's heart swelled with a quiet sense of contentment. He had never imagined this would happen. He'd come to Zoranine to do a job, to fix injuries and help the settlers. But somewhere along the way, he had found something more than that. He had found a connection, a bond with Lyra that he never could have predicted. As the evening turned to night, they stayed outside, talking about everything and nothing. They spoke of their lives, their pasts, their hopes, and their fears. There was no rush, no sense of urgency. It was simply two people finding comfort in each other's presence. When it was time to say goodnight, Lyra stood and gave Jack a soft smile. "Thank you for everything, Jack, for being here." Jack stood too, reaching out to touch her arm. "I told you, I'm not going anywhere." She gave him a small laugh, her eyes glimmering. "I think I believe you now." And with that, Jack watched her disappear into her home, the door closing softly behind her. He stood there for a moment, staring at the stars above, and he couldn't help but feel hopeful. Maybe it was because of Lyra. Maybe it was because of the way she had changed him. Either way, he knew that life on Zoran 9 would never be the same. Again, tomorrow would come, and the future was still uncertain. But Jack didn't feel scared anymore. With Lyra by his side, whatever happened next, he knew they could face it together. The weeks passed, and life on Zoran 9 began to settle into a rhythm. Jack continued his work with the settlers, offering medical care and advice when needed, while Lyra's legs slowly healed. But there was more than just the physical healing happening. The bond between them grew stronger with every passing day. Jack had never expected to feel so connected to someone, especially not an alien. Lyra had become an integral part of his life in a way that was difficult to explain. They had spent long hours talking about everything about their cultures, their pasts, their dreams. Lyra's nomadic lifestyle, which had once defined her, no longer seemed like the only path forward for her. She spoke less of her old life on the move and more about what it might mean to stay in one place. Still, despite the growing bond between them, there was something in the air, something unspoken, that neither Jack nor Lyra could ignore. Their relationship had deepened, but there were moments when Jack felt the weight of the unknown. The future was uncertain. Could they continue on this path together, or would the differences between them, between their species, tear them apart? Evening, as they sat by the fire outside Lyra's home, Jack could see the worry in her eyes. It wasn't the same kind of worry she had shown when she was injured. This was something else, something deeper. She was restless, as if there were something she needed to say, but couldn't. "You've been quiet tonight," Jack said gently, looking at her from across the fire. "Something on your mind?" Lyra looked at him, her face illuminated by the warm glow of the flames. She sighed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I've been thinking," she began slowly. "I feel ... torn, Jack. I've been with you here, and it's been comforting. But I don't know what it means. I don't know where this is going." Jack listened, his heart aching with understanding. "I don't know where it's going either," he said softly. "But I do know that I'm here, and I want to be here with you." Lyra looked down at her hands, her fingers playing with the fabric of her clothing. "It's not just about you and me, though," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've spent my whole life running, but I can't keep running forever. The elders, my people, they won't understand. I'm breaking traditions by staying here, and I'm afraid that, if I stay, I'll lose myself. Or worse, I'll lose the respect of those who are important to me." Jack reached across the fire, gently touching her hand. "Lyra, you don't have to choose between me and your people. You don't have to lose yourself. You can be who you are, and we can still figure this out. Together." For a long moment, Lyra didn't speak. She stared into the fire, her expression lost in thought. Jack could tell she was wrestling with something inside herself, something she hadn't fully shared with him yet. The tension in the air was thick, but Jack stayed silent, giving her the space she needed. Finally, Lyra spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never been this close to anyone before," she said. "Not like this. I've always kept my distance, always kept moving. But now, I don't know. I don't know if I can live without this. Without you." Jack felt a warmth spread through him, and his heart swelled at her words. "Lyra," he said softly, "you don't have to choose between us. You don't have to live your life according to what others expect. You can make your own choices. God, you can live your life the way you want. I'm not asking you to change who you are. I'm asking you to be with me, just as you are." Her eyes met his, and for the first time, Jack saw a flicker of something different in her gaze. It wasn't fear or uncertainty. It was something like hope. Like she was finally allowing herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have. Both. "I don't know what the future holds, Jack," she said, her voice filled with emotion, "but I want to find out with you." Jack smiled, a genuine smile that reached all the way to his eyes. "Then let's find out together." That night, as they sat by the fire, Jack and Lyra shared a quiet moment of understanding. They didn't need to say anything more. The words had been spoken, and now, all that was left was to figure out the rest. one step at a time. Over the next few days, Jack and Lyra spent more time together. They continued to talk about their pasts, their fears, and their hopes for the future. Lyra had decided to stay at least for Nayan. Jack was more than willing to support her in whatever way she needed. But even as they grew closer, there was still the issue of the elders and the rest of the Zorani people. They had always been wary of outsiders, and Jack knew that they wouldn't be pleased with Lyra's decision to stay with him, especially now that she was growing closer to him in ways they couldn't understand. One morning, as Jack was walking toward Lyra's home, he noticed a group of Zorani elders gathered in the center of the settlement. They were talking in low voices, their faces serious. Jack's instinct told him something was off, and as he approached, he overheard part of their conversation. "We cannot allow this to continue," one of the elders was saying. "Lyra is a symbol to our people. She cannot be allowed to stay. With the humans, this is not what our ancestors intended." Jack felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He knew the Zorani were proud people, but he hadn't realized how deeply their traditions ran. Lyra was caught between her own desires and the expectations of her people, and he was caught in the middle. He approached the group, standing tall and steady. "I understand your concerns," Jack said, his voice calm but firm. "But Lyra is an adult. She can make her own decisions. She's not a symbol. She's a person." The elders turned to face him, their eyes sharp and calculating. "You speak as if you know us," one elder said coldly. "But you do not. You are a human, an outsider. You do not understand the weight of our traditions." Jack held his ground, not backing down. "Maybe not. But I know this Lyra deserves to live her life on her own terms, and she has chosen to stay here with me." The elder's expression softened slightly, but the tension in the air was palpable. Jack knew that this wasn't over, that Lyra's choice would have consequences. But for the first time, he didn't feel afraid. He wasn't going to let anyone tear them apart, not without a fight. Lyra appeared behind Jack, and for a moment, the elders fell silent. She stood tall, her presence commanding attention. "I've made my choice," she said, her voice steady, "and I ask that you respect it." The elder nodded slowly, but there was still a coldness in her eyes. "We will see what comes of this, Lyra. You are making a choice that will affect us all." Lyra didn't say anything more. She simply turned and walked back to Jack's side. Her hand reaching for his, he squeezed it gently, offering her the reassurance she needed. Together they faced the future, uncertain of what would come next. But certain of one thing, they would face it together. The following days were filled with uncertainty. The Zorani elders had not been pleased with Lyra's decision, and Jack could feel the tension in the air whenever they passed by the settlement. He had always known that Lyra's choice would come with consequences. But seeing the way the elders looked at her now made it feel real. It wasn't just about them anymore. It was about her entire culture, her people, and the traditions they held dear. Jack didn't know what to expect. He wasn't sure if Lyra's decision would spark an open conflict or if it would slowly change things over time. But one thing was certain. Lyra had chosen to stay, and she had chosen him. That was all Jack needed to know. Lyra, on the other hand, had been more reserved. Though she had made her decision, she carried a weight with her now, one that wasn't just about her leg anymore. It was about her place in the world, her place among her people. She was torn between the loyalty she felt for her culture and the love she had for Jack. One evening, as they sat together by the edge of the settlement, Lyra spoke, her voice filled with quiet concern. "Jack, I feel like I'm losing myself," she said, her eyes reflecting the sunset's golden glow. "I'm not sure if I'm still who I was before." Jack reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. He knew exactly what she meant. He had seen the way the elders looked at her, the way the others whispered behind her back. But he also saw the strength in Lyra, the strength that had been there from the start, the strength that had helped her survive everything she had been through. He wasn't going to let that go. "You're still you, Lyra," Jack said softly. "You're just ... finding a new version of yourself. A version that doesn't have to follow the old ways if it doesn't feel right. And I'll be here. No matter what you decide. But I know that you're not losing yourself. You're just changing, like we all do. Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. I don't know what I would do without you, Jack. I feel like I'm walking in two worlds right now. Sometimes it's hard to know which way to go. Jack smiled at her, feeling his heart swell with affection. Then let me walk with you, Lyra. I don't have all the answers, but I do know that. We can figure it out together. The days that followed were quieter, but no less complicated. The Zorani elders still watched Lyra closely, and Jack could feel their judgment. It was in their eyes when they passed him in the streets. It was in the whispered conversations behind closed doors. But Jack didn't care. It made his choice. And so had Lyra. They would face whatever came next, side by side. One morning, as Jack made his way to the settlement center, he was stopped by one of the Zorani elders, the one who had spoken most harshly about Lyra's choice. The elder, a tall woman with silver-gray hair, regarded him coolly, her sharp eyes never leaving his face. You think you know what's best for Lyra? The elder asked, her voice low, almost a growl. You're a human. You don't understand our ways. You don't understand what it means to live as we do. Jack stood his ground, his voice calm but firm. I understand that Lyra is an individual. And I understand that she gets to make her own choices. No one, not even you, gets to take that away from her. The elder didn't reply immediately. Instead, she regarded him silently, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke again. You think you're protecting her? But there are things about our people that you will never understand. You may think she belongs here with you, but there are consequences. And they will be felt by both of you. Jack didn't flinch. He had heard similar words before, from soldiers who didn't understand him, from people who feared what they didn't know. This wasn't any different. I'm not afraid of the consequences. I'm not afraid of your traditions. What I'm afraid of is losing Lyra, and that's not going to happen. The elder narrowed her eyes, but for the first time, there was a flicker of something else in her gaze. Maybe it was respect, or maybe it was just a hint of uncertainty. Either way, she turned and walked away without another word. Jack watched her go, his heart still pounding in his chest. He knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, more questions about his place in Lyra's life. But one thing was clear. He wasn't going anywhere. No matter how hard it got, no matter how much the elders or anyone else tried to tear them apart, he would be by her side. Later that evening, when Jack met up with Lyra by the settlement's edge, he could tell she had noticed the tension. Always seemed to sense when something was off. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any hint of what had happened. What did they say? Lyra asked quietly. Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. They're still not happy about us being together. The elders think I'm a threat, I guess. Lyra's expression hardened, her jaw tightening. I should never have let them dictate my life. I'm sorry, Jack. I didn't want to drag you into this. Jack reached for her hand, holding it tightly. Lyra, this isn't about them. This is about you and me, and no one can change that. You don't need their approval to be happy. She looked down at their joined hands, her voice softening. I don't know what to do, Jack. I don't know if I can keep living like this. If they keep ... pushing me away. You don't have to do anything right now, Jack said, his voice gentle. You just have to be yourself. If staying here with me is what you want, then we'll make it work. We'll figure it out. Together. Lyra nodded slowly, her grip tightening around his hand. I want to stay, Jack. I do. I'm just ... scared. Jack pulled her into a gentle hug, holding her close. I know, but we'll face it together, all right? I'm not leaving you. Lyra buried her face against his chest, her voice barely a whisper. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And in that moment, surrounded by the peaceful landscape of Zoranin, Jack knew that no matter how hard the road ahead would be, they would face it together. He wouldn't let go of her hand, not now, not ever.